Alright, so it's been a couple of days now. I got the cylinder head back. It's been machined, cleaned, and it's ready to go back on the vehicle. I got the new gasket. You can see the new gasket has all this gasket material that the old gasket doesn't have. And of course, some of it was residue on the cylinder head, but not a whole lot to complete where this was. So you can definitely tell that coolant was intruding in cylinder number 1. You can see around all the other cylinders, most of the gasket material is still there. It's just the cross sections where they're completely missing. So those are the weakest part about the head gaskets. But we got a new head gasket. We got our cylinder head ready. I'm gonna go ahead, while I have all this room back here, replace all the lines I'm supposed to replace, and we'll go ahead and throw the head back on. So I made sure my deck face was all nice and clean. I placed the head gasket on. I double checked all the holes of the head gaskets are lining up with the coolant passages. I got my cylinder head bolts here. You got to use new ones because the old ones are torque to yield. And we got the head already wiped down and dried. Careful with the face. And off we go. Nice and smooth. Make sure it's on the dowels and it doesn't twist or rotate. Make sure this is all out the way, and we look good. So now it's time to actually get our bolts inside of here and started. I lube these up just a little bit, just a tad. I don't like putting head bolts in dry unless I'm told otherwise, but not too much. I don't want to get too much oil in the head bolts. And I should have said that before you probably place these head bolts in there, get like an air chuck, one of these, and make sure you blow out all the fluids out of the bolt holes. Because worst case scenario, you get some coolant in there and you break a bolt, so, or it doesn't torque correctly. So you just want to make sure all those bolt holes for the head bolts are free of any fluids. So let me go ahead and get my gun. Now set this to just so it's tight. We're just using this to run down the bolts, not to actually torque them. So let me just go ahead and torque all these bolts. Again, it's just 7 Newton meters. Or no, it went this way in a big crisscross pattern. 7 to 15 to 55, 90, 90. So let me go ahead and torque all of these down. Now that we got our cylinder head installed and our head bolts torqued to spec, it is now time to install both the cams, the intake and exhaust. I had everything set up in order and labeled, so everything is going in the same place as I took it off. If you were replacing the head and you had new valves, new tappets and new camshafts, there's going to be like a whole nother process in valve clearance and checking valve clearance and getting the right tappet in the right place. But since these are the original parts, we don't gotta worry about that. The only thing we gotta worry about is placing the right tappets in the correct spots. So good thing I labeled everything and I set everything in order, so the way it's facing this way is the way it goes on the cylinder head. So we got all of our tappets inside our cylinder head. Now it's time to install our camshafts. So I made sure all the lobes are kind of clean, and then I like using this assembly goo. It's very tacky, goes on pretty thick. So once we got all of our cam lobes all coated with that assembly goo, I just place a little bit, a tiny bit on the journals where the cam caps are going to be going, because I'm actually going to be oiling the cam caps instead of using this assembly goo, just so I get a good torque spec. And our timing mark, or the mark I placed on the VCT, should help us installing this cam so we're not 180 degrees out. And so we'll just place it, make sure this yellow mark I placed on here is facing upward, and that should give us a general idea where this cam should sit. Okay, once we got our camshafts all tacked up and ready to be installed, we're going to go ahead and move our camshaft caps over. So I'm going to start with my intake and place them right here on front of the vehicle. And again, just make sure our back of our cam is as close as possible to top dead center, with this back of this cam not being 180 degrees, not 180 degrees, but parallel to the cylinder head. If you have to move it, no worries. Some of the valves are going to have to be compressed, like cylinder number 3 intake is supposed to be fully down, the lobes are down, so it's going to be sticking up a little bit. Just make sure that it's not cylinder number 1 or cylinder number 4 that you're compressing the valves when you're rotating the cam, because those are the cylinders that are up right now. If you do have to move it, just make sure you're compressing only 2 and 3, which again, our cylinder number 2 is on its exhaust stroke, and our cylinder number 4 is going to be on the intake stroke. So we do have to move it. At least we're moving it on cylinder 2 and 3 and not on 1 and 4. That kind of sounds confusing, but as long as you have the back of the cams as close as possible, then it should be good to go. Lube the journal up and lube the actual cap. We'll place the cap in. We'll start the bolts. Okay, we got all of our cam caps installed on the camshafts and ready to be torqued down to spec. We got all of our 4 exhaust caps on, and we're going to place our sealant on this last cam cap. It goes right there. We're just going to place a little bit. You don't want to place too much. We got our gasket maker on our exhaust cam cap. Now we got about, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes before this fully hardens. Before we torque it down to 7 Newton meters, let's go ahead and tie in our cam in the way it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to be holding it with my wrench, and I hold it where the timing marks on my VCT are pointing at 12 o'clock, and the back of my cam is perpendicular, meaning parallel to our cylinder head. And I'm just going to just use a 10mm on a ratchet just to tighten these caps up a little bit so it doesn't move too much while we're torquing these down. So we're now ready to go to 7 Newton meters. I tighten these all by hand a little bit just for the cam caps to bottom out, and then we're going to go ahead and torque these bad boys. So we're finished with 7 Newton meters. Let's go ahead and go up to 16, and we should be done with the exhaust side cam caps. Now moving on to the intake side. This one just only has 4 caps, and it's the same process. I'm just going to be holding the cam while I hand tighten to bottom out the caps, and then we'll go to the torque specs. Now all of these cam caps are torque to spec. Let's go ahead and throw our cam alignment tool in. So we're just going to grab our wrench, and they're going to be off just a little bit, so you kind of have to move the cam back and forth, get one side started, and then get the other one aligned up. Cool, our tool is in. We're going to go ahead and screw in our hold down into the cylinder head. Cool, our tie downs in, so these cams will not move. They're just an alignment tool, not really to hold down the cams. You could actually damage the back of the cams. But let's go ahead and install our front VCT cam caps. It's time to throw our VCT solenoids in. I marked them intake and exhaust, and place them in. Alright, now we got our whole head assembled and done with. It's time to throw on the timing chain. I like to throw the timing chain on first and align my marks that I made on my chain and line it up with the VCT units in the bottom of the crank. Alright, once we got our timing marks lined up, that one's lined up, and our crank sprocket's lined up. Now we can pull this tensioner pin, and it should tighten the chain. And there we go. We made sure everything is still lined up. Has lined up, and our exhaust is lined up. So timing is set. Once we get the front cover on and the crank pulley on, we'll do a couple rotations to make sure there's no interference with the valves, and we can start putting the rest of the car back together. So for our timing cover, we're going to go ahead, and I cleaned this up already. I put a new crank seal, I got a new crank bolt, and I removed all the silicone from the timing cover and all of the silicone from the timing cover mating face. So we are ready to go ahead and apply our silicone to our timing cover. These are our torque specs and our torque sequence, so let's go ahead and do these. Let's go ahead and throw this in. All right, we are on the final stretch. We got our crankshaft hand tighten. We got our water pump pulley hand tighten. We got our other idler pulley hand tighten. And then we got our engine mount all tightened so we can raise the vehicle up and go ahead and torque our crankshaft pulley. We're about to tighten the crankshaft pulley. We got the engine mount all set up so we can raise it. Now this is torqued to 100 newton meters and then 180 degrees after that. All right, we got that torque. So we got our whole engine time. We got the front of the engine sealed up. We got our crankshaft pulley torqued down. I removed the timing peg, and I'm about to remove this camshaft alignment tool. And let's rotate this engine and see if it's all rotating freely and there's no interference with the valve. So here goes nothing. Alright, so it all rotated good. There was no hiccups while turning. It was all smooth. So I think we're good. That was probably the most technical part about putting it back together, was setting up the timing and torquing everything down. Now the rest is just easy. We'll just put everything back together and start her up. So let me go ahead, and I already got the turbo side all set up. I'm gonna get this front side, throw all the whatnots on, and throw the back of the accessories for the back of the cam, and we should all be good. So So I finally came to a point where I could start the vehicle and see how it runs. I put some oil in there, I filled it up with some coolant. I'm doing a pressure test right now, making sure there's no external coolant leaks and it's holding pressure. I haven't put the cowl on yet, just in case there is something I missed, say like on the back side or anywhere on the rear of the engine. I have easy access to it without taking all that stuff off again. But if it starts, runs good, then I'll go ahead and throw that all back on and test drive it. So let's go ahead and start it real quick. Alright. The best part to see if it runs or not. So let's go ahead and turn the key on. Let's build up the fuel pressure. Key off. Key on. Key off. Key on. Alright, here goes nothing. Oh, that was a long crank, but it started. And that is it. It's been running for about 15-20 minutes now. Both the coolant system, everything's running good. No hiccups. I charged the AC system, so that's all good. And boom, that is it. That is a walkthrough on tearing down a 2.3 engine all the way down to the short block, removing the cylinder head and inspecting the head gasket. And now I'm done. I road tested the vehicle. I made sure it's accelerated nice. There's no misfires. It's building boost. And then I'm also monitoring my PIDs and making sure everything, all the sensors are reading correctly and everything looks good. Nothing out of the normal. And so I say that I'll let this vehicle sit overnight, make sure the customer's concern is fixed, and then that is it. So hopefully that was simple walkthrough, and hope you enjoyed. So thanks for watching.